certain is that they appeared from the mist. Some say they arrived on dark clouds, descendant as if alien. Others say they arrived on a ship bound from the lost city of Atlantis. And some say they were just Norwegian, but I think Atlantis makes a better story. Wherever they came from, the Tuatha de Danann arrived in Ireland thousands of years ago, and no mortal had seen such a people ever before. They were tall and strong, with skin as pale as snow and hair as red as fire and tiny eyes that gleamed like crystals. Some people thought that they were magic folk because they knew all the secrets of the land and could tell you all the medicinal uses for all the herbs. And this was magic they had learned from their mother, the goddess Dana, the mother of all Celtic gods and goddesses. And because their skin was so fair, they came to be known as the fair folk, or what you might know as the fairies. Now, the fair folk ruled Ireland for thousands of years in peace, for they were a peaceful folk. They lived to protect the earth and all its creatures. Until one day, there arrived another people, the Milesians. They saw them arrive in the white ships, billowing sails off on the horizon, a white flag waving with a banner of a dead snake and the staff of Moses. Now, the Milesians were the sons of Mil, and Mil was the grandson of Noah, you know, the one with the ark. And the son of their leader had been bitten by a poisonous snake as a young child, and he nearly died, but they took him to the prophet Moses, who healed him with his staff and prophesied that his people would find prosperity on an island to the north, where there be no poisonous snakes, that they might find in the path of the setting sun. Now, Ireland looked like quite an island, and so they set out to colonize the land and rule over its people. But of course, there be the fairy folk already there. So, there was a great war. Thousands of people fell. And some say that the Milesians won the war, and the fairy folk simply disappeared, they died out. But I'll tell you what really happened. Now, the fair folk loved the earth more than anything. And they looked around and they saw in the ravages of war that their rivers ran red with blood, and the forests had been cut down to make bows and spears, and their precious stones had been mined to make daggers, and they saw the land in pain and couldn't take it anymore. So they offered the Milesians a truce. They said, "We shall cease our fighting if you agree to divide the land equally." But the leader of the Milesians now, they came to rule all of Ireland, not to rule half of it. And so they had a plan, but they agreed on one condition, that their people should be given first choice of which half of Ireland they should take. Now, the fair folk loved all the land equally, so they thought, oh, all right, that's not so bad. So on the eve of the solstice, under a hollow moon, their leaders gathered under the boughs of a hawthorn tree, which has magical powers, you know. And they bound their wrists in Celtic knots, and they swore an ancient oath to live in peace. And just as soon as the magic was finished, the leader of the Milesians declared, "Ha-ha! The land that we shall claim for ourselves be the half of Ireland that be above ground," leaving for the fairy folk that was below. The caves, the burrows, the tunnels that the animals dug, and the ones they could dig for themselves. And so, the Milesians lived above ground and became the ancestors of what y'all know as the Gaelic folk, the modern ancestors of Ireland. While the fairy folk were forced to live beneath the ground, they dug their tunnels, their fairy kingdoms, under the mounds, what came to be known as the She. And oh, it was a miserable life below ground. No sunshine, no space to frolic in the forests, and finally, after decades and generations, their people grew smaller and smaller and smaller, till the smallest among them could fit in the palm of your hand. And oh, they were miserable. They cried so, and so finally they, in grief, called out to the goddess Dana, their mother, and asked that she could return them to the land above. They had sworn a magic oath, you remember, and it could not be broken even by a goddess. But all over Ireland, hidden in the forests, back in the brooks. She opened tiny portals, but the fairy folk could slip between this world and the world of the unseen, the world beyond the veil, where no mortal could see. They call this land the Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth. And it is in the land of eternal youth the fairies have lived since that day. And every once in a while, when a traveller wanders a bit too far into the forest, he might find himself in the Tir na Nog amongst the fairies. And he might find that one day in the mortal land feels like 10 in fairyland. And so many a traveller have fallen in love with the fairies and come back. And that be why you still have so many red-headed folk in Ireland. They are the children of the fairies. And if you still don't believe me that fairies exist, I dare you to go back into the forests, to look carefully in gardens such as these for tiny fairy homes, to prove yourself to be a friend of the earth, that they might reveal themselves to you, and to listen very carefully for the laugh of a fairy. Where's my fairy?